State Department, with the US Congress, in the Canadian Parliament. We also had a hearing at the British Parliament, which is one of the largest committee on religious freedom of religious belief, in which I had also traveled to many other countries, creating awareness on pension issue. I want to thank honourable members of Parliament, Sujit Kumar, Chief Convener, All-Party Indian Parliamentary Forum for Tibet, Sushil Modi ji. I had the occasion to meet him in Bihar last time when the institute was opened. And Chaman P. Nandila, who has been very much involved on the Tibetan cause, who comes from Ladakh. Culturally, we are all very close. Anil ji, I didn't recognize him because he trimmed his beard from the last time we saw. And R.K. Krimeji, Chairman of the core group for Tibetan cause. The honorable members of Tibetan Parliament, our friends from the Ladakh Hill Council, Penpa Association, and the media. I have been traveling around the world as the democratically elected leader of Tibet and the Tibetan people, telling the world that we are dying a slow death. We are being stricken, like being squeezed out of our breath by the dragon. Our culture that is very closely associated with India. Our language, our script came from India. Buddhism came from India. We are proud to be a repository of one part of ancient Indian wisdom. At one time, Tibet was a huge empire in Central Asia between 7th to 9th century. Our empire extended from the capital of China, Sikyong, to present-day Samarkand in Uzbekistan. Then Tibet disintegrated for about 400 years. During those periods from 10th to 13th century, before Buddhism disappeared from the land of its origin, we transliterated almost every available Sanskrit and Pali text into Tibetan. And we are proud to be a repository of one part of ancient Indian wisdom. And we are the only one who have the complete set of Buddhist teachings in this world. Tibetan script is one among the 15 oldest script in this world, language in this world. And akin to one language in Amazonia and another in Papua New Guinea, Tibet is the third language. When you use the language, you have to apply your mind. So it is of utmost importance for India as well to preserve one of its branches of wisdom that the Tibetans have preserved in its pristine quality over the last 1,300 years. Of course, there are a lot of things to talk about. We live under the illusion that we lived in India for the last 64 years and the Indian people know about the Tibetan cause. But unfortunately, not so many, and more particularly about China. There is very little awareness on China. I know the concerned ministries and the departments are very well aware of China's designs and motivations in the region and internationally. But political leaders, elected members of parliament, have very little knowledge about Tibet, apart from those who are directly associated with us. Therefore, it's very important that we create more awareness on what China is doing, not only to Tibet, but also to the region, countries in the region, and internationally. So we have been traveling as much as possible. Last month I was in Brazil, in Colombia, Mexico, United States. This month I was in Canada, Spain, Austria, and France. And we have also visited many other countries to spread awareness about Tibet. Unfortunately, not many understand China as they should. That is why I keep telling them it's not just that I come here to seek support for Tibet, but it's for your own country's future. It's for your own people that you need to understand China. It's not enough just to have investment from China and be happy about it. There's nothing called free lunch with China. Everything has a design. China has a lot of strategy involved whenever they invest money in any part of the world. Unfortunately, despite the rhetorics from many countries, business is going up with China. And the only thing that can bring China down on its knees is economy. Right now, China is having a lot of problems on the economic front, and also on the political front, even though the system is very opaque. There are a lot of things that we can talk about: the geostrategic importance of Tibet, the historical independent status of Tibet, and the role that Tibet plays as a political buffer between the two most populous nations in this world, India and China. Till China's occupation of Tibet in 1950, there was never ever a border between China and India. There was never ever a war between India and China. Only after China occupied Tibet, it became Indo-China border. But I take solace in the fact that the Indian government has not changed the name from Indo-Tibetan Border Force, Indo-Tibetan Border Police, to Indo-China Border Police. And I would urge the media also to use the same that the Indian government uses, that underlines the thinking behind the Indian government's policies towards China. There are a lot of things that we can talk about in terms of the geostrategic importance of Tibet, its location, the size of Tibet. At one time, a Pakistani journalist asked me, which is bigger, Bhutan or Tibet? It's multiple times. Tibet is 10 times the size of UK, 18 times the size of Japan, about 60-70% of India's landmass, 25% of China's landmass. So the size of Tibet itself had played a role as a political buffer between the two most populous nations. And in the future, if there is a negotiated solution with China, Tibet and Tibetans can play the role of a bridge between the two most populous nations in the world. We can also help in building trust between China and India. That is why His Holiness has adopted the middle way policy, a policy that's based on pragmatism, that's based on the reality of the situation, where Chinese and Tibetans can mutually benefit from each other. A negotiated, non-violent solution could be lasting, and that is what we are pushing for, despite the historical status of Tibet as an independent state. When I travel around the world, I also tell governments that if you keep repeating the statement just like a parrot, at the instance of the Chinese government, that Tibet is part of PRC, you're going against international law. We have only one agreement with China, that's a 17-point agreement, the so-called 17-point agreement that was forced upon us after occupation of Chamdo, and under international law, that should be null and void. Whether it's happening to Ukraine today, or whether it happened to Tibet more than 70 years ago, it's the same international law after the formation of the United Nations. And we also tell governments that you keep repeating the statement that Tibet is part of PRC. But on the other hand, just maybe to appease His Holiness PanchenLama or the Tibetans, countries also say we support negotiation between the representative of His Holiness PanchenLama and the Tibetan and the Chinese leadership. But these two don't go together. If there is no recognition of the historical status of Tibet as an independent country, there is no liberation for middle way. There's no reason why China should come and talk to us. And when you keep repeating that statement, then you're removing the very ground for negotiations. And the third thing we tell the international community is that why is China asking other governments to say Tibet is part of PRC, not other regions like East Turkestan and Mongolia? Because the Chinese government knows that they have no legitimacy of their rule over Tibet. That is why they are trying to seek that legitimacy from the international community. But unfortunately, the international community does not understand Tibet's history, but they keep parroting China's coercive means of accepting Tibet as part of China. And that is not fair, that is not justice for the Tibetan people. And there is also the environmental significance of Tibet. Tibetan rivers, the rivers that originate from Tibet flow into India and Pakistan in the form of Indus, which is the cradle of Indus Valley civilization, one of the oldest civilizations in this world. Yellow River originates from Tibet and flow into China. and Yellow River is the cradle of Chinese civilization. So rivers that originate from Tibet are homes to many civilizations, and some of them very old civilizations in this world. If it is not for Yellow and Yangtze, China would not be able to support its 1.4 billion people. Then you have the Mekong that flows from Tibet and into 5 different countries in Southeast Asia: Burma, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam. Then you also have Irrawaddy and Salween that flows into Burma. You have the Brahmaputra that originates from Western Tibet, comes to Eastern Tibet, takes a U-turn to come into India and into Bangladesh. And China is building a dam twice the size of Three Gorges, which is the biggest in the world, to generate 3 times the electricity that Three Gorges produces. And you can imagine how much land is going to be inundated upstream to store that much of water that will destroy so much flora and fauna that is very unique to Tibet. Last time I was in Arunachal Pradesh, and the Chief Minister Penpa Tsering was very kind enough to send us a helicopter to travel by. And I was traveling from Meo to Tuting, and the whole route of that helicopter was over the Brahmaputra. And Brahmaputra was very murky. When you see from the helicopter, the tributaries that join the Brahmaputra were pristine clean, pristine clear, and that's how Brahmaputra should be coming from inside Tibet, but it's very murky. When I asked the locals, they said it's not just happening in the last 2-3 months or last 1 year. It has been happening since 2018. And that is proof enough of what Chinese government is doing at Pema, the Great Bend, where they are building this massive mega structure. And the whole Himalayan region, as scientists say, is still growing by 10 millimeters every year because of the tectonic shift between the Gondwanas and the Eurasian plate. In that case, the whole Himalayan region is also prone to earthquakes, to seismic. It's a huge seismic zone. If something happens to the size of